How did Microsoft win the browser war after arriving late to the internet? In the middle of the 1990s, Netscape looked almost impossible to defeat. Its Navigator browser had become the main doorway to the World Wide Web. For many users, Netscape was not simply one browser among many. It was the internet. Microsoft, by contrast, had underestimated how quickly the web would reshape personal computing. The company dominated desktop software, but it was late to recognize the browser as a strategic threat. Netscape moved first, built the stronger brand, attracted millions of users, and established itself as the obvious leader of the new internet economy. By early 1996, Navigator accounted for more than 80% of browser usage. Internet Explorer held only a small fraction of the market. Yet within a few years, that position had reversed. The usual explanation is simple. Microsoft bundled Internet Explorer with Windows, gave it away for free, and used its control of the operating system to overwhelm Netscape. That explanation is not wrong, but it is incomplete. Bundling a product does not automatically make people use it. A browser can be installed on a computer and still be ignored. Users could continue downloading Navigator. Computer manufacturers could promote another browser. Internet service providers could recommend different software. Developers could build around Netscape's technologies. And Netscape still possessed something Microsoft did not, the advantage of arriving first. It had the brand. It had the users. It had the reputation for innovation. It had become the default choice in the minds of people who were discovering the web for the first time. More importantly, Netscape had ambitions far beyond browsing websites. The company believed the browser could become a new software platform. Applications could run through the browser instead of depending directly on a specific operating system. In that future, Windows might remain on the computer, but it would become less important. Users would interact with the internet through Netscape, while developers could reach customers without building everything around Microsoft's platform. For Netscape, this was an opportunity. For Microsoft, it was an existential threat. The battle was therefore larger than a contest between two pieces of software. Microsoft was not merely trying to build a better browser. It was trying to prevent the browser from becoming the layer that controlled the relationship between users, developers, and the internet. That raises the real question. If Netscape had the better starting position, the stronger identity, and the larger user base, what allowed Microsoft to reverse the market so quickly? Was the outcome decided by product quality? Was it decided by price? Was it simply the result of putting Internet Explorer inside Windows? Or did Microsoft possess a deeper advantage that Netscape could not match? To understand what happened, we have to stop looking at the browser as an isolated product and examine the competitive system around it. Because Netscape entered the war as the leader of the internet, Microsoft entered it as the company that already controlled how most people reached the internet in the first place. To understand why the balance eventually shifted, we have to look beyond the browser itself and compare the positions that both companies occupied before the war truly began. Netscape was born inside the internet revolution. Microsoft had built its empire long before the commercial internet became mainstream. That difference shaped everything. Netscape's success depended on persuading more people to choose Navigator. Every new user strengthened its brand, increased its influence with software developers, and reinforced its vision that the browser would become the center of computing. Its business reflected that strategy. Navigator was initially sold as commercial software, while the company also invested heavily in server software that businesses would use to build internet services. The browser was both a product and the gateway into a broader software ecosystem. Microsoft viewed the situation from an entirely different perspective. Its largest source of profit was Windows. By the middle of the 1990s, Windows was already installed on the overwhelming majority of personal computers around the world. Thousands of software companies built applications specifically for Windows, and countless hardware manufacturers depended on it. This created an ecosystem that generated enormous revenue and gave Microsoft resources few technology companies could match. That also meant Microsoft faced a very different set of incentives. Netscape needed its browser to become more valuable over time. Microsoft needed Windows to remain indispensable. Those are not the same objective. Because Windows generated substantial cash flow, Microsoft could afford to treat Internet Explorer differently from Netscape's Navigator. The browser did not have to become a profitable standalone business. It only needed to protect the strategic position of Windows. That changed the economics of the competition. Microsoft could invest aggressively in development, distribute Internet Explorer without charging users, and continue improving the software without relying on browser sales to recover those costs. Netscape could not fight under identical conditions. The browser represented a much larger share of its future. At the same time, Microsoft was rapidly closing the technical gap. Early versions of Internet Explorer were widely considered less capable than Navigator. But Microsoft committed engineering resources at a remarkable pace. New releases arrived frequently, compatibility improved, performance increased, and many of the most visible differences between the two browsers gradually disappeared. By the end of 1996, Internet Explorer had reached a level where most ordinary users could accomplish the same everyday tasks on either browser. That detail is important. Once two products become similar enough for the average customer, competition begins to shift. The deciding factor is no longer only which product is technically superior. Other advantages begin to matter much more. Microsoft possessed several of them. It already maintained long-standing relationships with computer manufacturers that shipped millions of new personal computers every year. It worked closely with software developers whose applications depended on Windows. It had partnerships across the broader personal computer industry that had been built over more than a decade. None of these relationships guaranteed victory. A browser still had to be good enough for people to use. But they created opportunities that Netscape simply did not possess. The question was no longer whether Microsoft could build a competitive browser. The more important question became how those existing relationships could influence the way new internet users encountered a browser for the very first time. That is where the competitive landscape began to change in ways that were far more significant than feature lists or software reviews alone. The turning point did not begin with a dramatic technological breakthrough. It began with a change in what Microsoft chose to compete for. Instead of asking how to persuade people to switch browsers, Microsoft focused on something much more fundamental. Who controlled the moment when a new user entered the internet for the first time? That question reshaped the entire battlefield. Every new personal computer represented a potential new internet user. Before that person downloaded any software, visited any website, or developed any preference, someone determined which browser appeared first on the screen. Microsoft already had relationships with nearly every major personal computer manufacturer because of Windows licensing. Those relationships became strategically valuable in ways that extended far beyond the operating system itself. Internet Explorer was shipped with Windows and presented as the browser users encountered immediately after setting up a new computer. At the same time, Microsoft negotiated agreements with computer manufacturers that limited how prominently competing browsers could be presented on the Windows desktop. According to the findings of fact in the United States antitrust case against Microsoft, original equipment manufacturers could not freely remove Internet Explorer access or substantially alter the Windows user experience in ways that would reduce its visibility. This mattered because most consumers rarely replaced default software unless they had a compelling reason to do so. The browser people saw first often became the browser they continued using. Microsoft expanded the same logic beyond computer manufacturers. Internet service providers were another critical gateway. During the 1990s, millions of people did not simply connect to the internet by themselves. They subscribed through companies such as America Online and other large providers that supplied installation software, connection tools, and recommended internet applications. Microsoft actively pursued partnerships with these companies. The Department of Justice later documented that Microsoft reached agreements covering 14 of the 15 largest internet access providers in North America. These arrangements gave Internet Explorer privileged placement while reducing Netscape's visibility during the process of bringing new users online. The strategy continued across additional parts of the ecosystem. Microsoft offered marketing support, technical assistance, and commercial incentives to partners willing to promote Internet Explorer. In another highly visible example, Microsoft reached an agreement with Apple in 1997 that included Internet Explorer becoming the default browser on Macintosh computers, while Microsoft continued developing Microsoft Office for the Mac platform. None of these decisions guaranteed immediate victory. People could still install Navigator. Netscape remained well known. Many experienced internet users continued to prefer it. But the competitive equation was beginning to change. Instead of fighting for existing browser users one by one, Microsoft concentrated on influencing where the next wave of internet users started. The numbers reflected that shift. According to the court's findings, Netscape's browser usage share declined from more than 80% in early 1996 to roughly 55% by late 1997. During the same period, Internet Explorer climbed from approximately 5% to around 36%. Perhaps even more revealing, by the end of 1997, Internet Explorer accounted for roughly 57% of browsers used by people who had begun using the internet within the previous 6 months. That statistic suggests something important. Microsoft was not merely convincing longtime Netscape users to switch. It was becoming the browser that many new users encountered before they had developed any preference at all. The competitive momentum was no longer being driven primarily by feature comparisons. It was increasingly being shaped by who stood at the entrance to the rapidly expanding internet economy. At first glance, these events seemed to confirm the familiar explanation. Microsoft bundled Internet Explorer with Windows. Microsoft signed agreements with hardware manufacturers and internet service providers. Microsoft made the browser free. Case closed. But that interpretation treats each decision as an isolated tactic instead of asking why those tactics work together. So effectively, the evidence points toward a deeper pattern. Internet Explorer did not need to become the undisputed best browser. It needed to become the browser that users encountered with the least amount of effort. By the late 1990s, the technical gap between Internet Explorer and Navigator had narrowed substantially. For many ordinary users, both browsers could perform the same everyday tasks: browsing websites, downloading files, displaying images, and running increasingly sophisticated web pages. Once products become similar enough, small differences in quality often matter less than differences in accessibility. Behavioral economics has repeatedly shown that default choices strongly influence human decisions. Whether in retirement savings, software settings, or online services, most people tend to stay with the option that requires the fewest additional steps. Microsoft did not create that tendency. It recognized it. Every agreement described in the antitrust findings reduced friction at a different point in the user's journey. Windows placed Internet Explorer on millions of new computers before users made any decision. Original equipment manufacturers had limited ability to remove or hide it. Internet service providers introduced new customers to the internet through software that prominently featured Internet Explorer. Commercial partnerships expanded the browser's visibility across even more entry points into the online world. Each individual advantage might have appeared modest. Together, they formed a system. That system mattered because the internet itself was growing at extraordinary speed. Millions of people were becoming first-time internet users every year. For those users, the most influential browser was often not the one with the strongest brand recognition among experienced users. It was the one they encountered first. This also explains why Netscape's existing popularity could not fully protect its position. Its installed user base remained valuable. Its technology remained respected. Its engineers continued innovating. But every new wave of internet adoption increasingly flowed through channels where Microsoft already possessed significant influence. The browser war was therefore not decided by convincing millions of loyal Netscape users to abandon Navigator overnight. It was decided by shaping the experience of millions of people who had never chosen any browser before. This distinction also helps explain another important observation from the court's findings. The judges did not conclude that integrating Internet Explorer into Windows alone was sufficient to produce Microsoft's market position. Instead, the findings described a broader combination of licensing practices, contractual restrictions, distribution agreements, technical integration, and financial incentives that reinforced one another across the personal computer ecosystem. Viewed individually, each action appears limited. Viewed together, they reveal a coordinated strategy focused on controlling how software reached users rather than simply competing, feature by feature. That changes the way we should understand the browser war. The browser itself was certainly important, but it was not the only object of competition. The real contest extended to something larger, the places where users began their digital journey and the mechanisms that determined which software became their starting point before any conscious comparison ever took place. Once that system began working in Microsoft's favor, the shift in market share becomes much easier to understand, not as the result of a single decision, but as the outcome of controlling the pathways through which the rapidly expanding internet reached its next generation of users. Seen from this perspective, Microsoft's victory becomes much easier to explain. Netscape was competing to build the browser people wanted. Microsoft was competing to shape the environment in which people chose a browser in the first place. Those are fundamentally different competitions. That is why reducing the browser war to a story about bundling Internet Explorer into Windows misses the larger strategic picture. Bundling was visible. The real advantage came from combining multiple assets that Microsoft already possessed. Windows gave the company access to personal computers before users ever connected to the internet. Relationships with original equipment manufacturers influenced how those computers reached consumers. Partnerships with internet service providers affected how millions of people experienced the web for the first time. A broad developer ecosystem ensured that Windows remained the center of personal computing even as the internet expanded. Financial strength allowed Microsoft to distribute Internet Explorer without depending on browser revenue. None of these elements alone guaranteed success. Together, they reinforced one another. The browser became one component inside a much larger competitive system. That also explains why Netscape's impressive achievements were not enough to preserve its leadership. The company built an extraordinary product. It helped define the early web. It introduced millions of people to internet browsing. But it was trying to defend a product against a competitor that could influence the channels through which new users, hardware manufacturers, software developers, and commercial partners entered the market. As the internet grew from millions of users into tens of millions, those channels became increasingly valuable. Every new user who accepted the default option strengthened Microsoft's position. That larger installed base encouraged more developers to optimize for Internet Explorer. Greater compatibility made the browser more attractive to businesses and consumers. Each new layer reinforced the next. The competitive advantage became cumulative rather than isolated. The browser war, therefore, was not ultimately determined by which browser displayed web pages more effectively. It was determined by which company controlled the infrastructure that connected products to users. That distinction continues to matter today. Across technology markets, companies often invest enormous resources into creating better products. Yet history repeatedly shows that products alone rarely determine long-term leadership. Distribution systems, platform control, ecosystem relationships, and default positions frequently shape competitive outcomes just as powerfully as engineering excellence. Looking back, Netscape did not simply lose because Microsoft built Internet Explorer. Nor did Microsoft win merely because Internet Explorer came with Windows. Microsoft recognized that the browser had become a strategic gateway. Instead of treating that gateway as another software category, the company focused on protecting the broader platform that already connected software developers, hardware manufacturers, and hundreds of millions of users. Once that objective became clear, the individual decisions that seemed unrelated began to fit together. The agreements with computer manufacturers, the partnerships with internet service providers, the free distribution model, the integration with Windows, the continued investment despite little direct browser revenue. They were all parts of the same strategy. The browser war reminds us that the most important battle is not always fought where customers are looking. Sometimes the decisive advantage belongs to the company that controls the path customers must take before they ever make a choice. And in the 1990s, Microsoft did not simply win a competition between two browsers. It secured control over the doorway through which an entire generation entered the internet.